Welcome to Subject Access, a podcast where I interview experts who work at the intersection of law, privacy, and AI. In each episode, we unpack what the rules are, how organizations are implementing them, and what's coming next. Today, we're going to be diving into the ethics of AI and privacy by design, looking at dark patterns, human-centric legal design, and the way we build tech, how it could influence it. Joining me is Marie Potel-Saville, a co-founder of Fair Patterns and Amurabi, both pioneers in ethical AI and human-centric legal design. Fair Patterns is on a mission to remove dark patterns from websites, and Amurabi is a legal design agency. I first got to know Marie when we worked together on the redesign of the King privacy policy, and she was kind enough to write an expert opinion on legal design for my book a few years ago. Welcome, Marie. How are you doing?
Thanks a lot, Ben. And thanks for reminding me about this amazing project that we did together at King. It was already a long time ago, but it was one of the best I've worked on, I have to say.
Yeah, it was great. And I feel like we have spoken quite a lot over the last sort of 4 years, and various things come up and we have a chat about them. So it's always nice to speak. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, there's a lot of stuff I think we both want to talk about on this topic. And before we jump in, as a sort of lead in, it would be really great to hear about how you became involved in legal transformation and innovation and why you're so passionate about it.
Yeah, well, I've had many different lives, as I like to say. First, I was a private practice lawyer in London, in big law. I did that for 10 years and I loved it. Honestly, the intellectual stimulation was absolutely great and made me thrive. Then I moved in-house and I discovered yet another facet of being a lawyer. I also dived into privacy while I was in-house because it was just before the entry into force of GDPR, so already quite a long time ago. But I was in charge of, the change management in preparation for GDPR. And I guess this is how I started to touch upon legal innovation, legal transformation. What does it take for an organization um, to actually transform not just the policies, not just the processes, but really the way it thinks and behaves when it comes to how it handles personal data. So I guess that was the starting point of my legal transformation journey. And then what happened also in house was that I moved on to a job as a VP legal, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, where I was really faced with the huge gap between the law and its users, and how the rule of law, which is so dear to my heart, and probably, more than ever in the current turmoil we're facing around the world, this is where I realized that it doesn't have to be this way, that the rule of law can actually be an amazing tool for empowerment, not just, for tick the box admin, stuff that create frustration and inefficiencies. That's really how I started my journey into legal innovation and legal transformation. Then I trained myself in innovation by design. And then a couple of years ago, I was lucky to meet my two co-founders. One has a background in MIT and the other has a PhD in ethical AI. And this is where I really dived into ethical AI and privacy, how AI is actually also transforming the way we humans think and behave. But I don't want to spoil the next question, so I'll just stop here.
Great. Thanks, Marie. And yeah, I think from what you've said there, it's really clear how you've had a very varied career. And I think for a lot of lawyers, it's quite inspiring to have had both success on the legal side, but also jumped onto the entrepreneurial side in something which really does kind of work in that rule of law space. And yeah, it's clear that your passion about on the ethical side really comes through from your from what you said there, and also your writing on LinkedIn. I always enjoy seeing your posts. So thank you for sharing that. So I think probably starting out, this is a podcast that's framed very much for privacy professionals, privacy and AI professionals. You've worked across AI, privacy, legal design. What do you think the biggest shift has been that you've seen? And what do you think privacy professionals need to think when it comes to ethics and design and all of these topics we're talking about in the AI era?
So to me, the biggest shift is, the consent theater has always been there online. This is not new. It's, I agree, is the biggest joke on the internet. It's been the biggest joke on the internet for decades. So that's absolutely not new. The real shift is when we delegate our navigation to AI agents that we can task with, booking, I don't know, an event or making our grocery shopping or anything that we delegate to them to do for us online. Well, this takes that, privacy paradox and consent theater that we all know to the next level. Because how do we even, you know, um, shape and the way that these agents are going to perform for us? Are we aware of any, you know, settings that are present by default? And also, the biggest shift of all is human computer interaction that becomes human AI interaction, and its huge impact on our ability to think critically. I'm sure you've seen for the past 6, 9 months an increasing number of scientific papers around the erosion of critical thinking in connection with the use of AI. That's no surprise, by the way, for behavioral researchers, because we all know about the automation bias. All humans have tons of cognitive biases. That's also not a surprise, nothing new. There are more than 180 cognitive biases. One of them is the automation bias, according to which basically humans tend to give more credibility to something that comes from a machine than from a human. And that automation bias, combined with a number of design choices, or at least design interfaces, when it comes to consent, takes the consent issue really to the next level. And I'm even questioning, I'm not saying I've got the answer, but I'm questioning whether the notion of consent per, per se is still meaningful at all in the age
Hmm.
of AI.
Yeah, I think a few things I'd just like to sort of ask a bit more deep questions on. You were talking there about automation bias and effectively like brain atrophy from the results of using AI over a long period of time. And from some of the reports I've seen, it's not even necessarily over that long a period. Um, One thing that I see in day to day in my work here and in my previous role at Trustpilot is in the legal context, what we were often automating was the repetitive high volume work, things like triaging, answering repetitive questions. And what we actually had the ability to do then was spend more time on the heavier cognitive load tasks. Um, how do you see that? Kind of, it's almost seems slightly different to what you're getting at there. How do you see those two playing off against each other?
Well, what you just described is the way legal tech was sold to us. And who wouldn't want to automate the low value repetitive tasks? Of course. And I'm not saying that it's incorrect, by the way. What is happening right now is, contract management platforms with AI suggestions that push some specific wording or clauses, or that flag that this given clause is actually contradictory to your template, or a number of things that are AI driven, which could be very useful. My point is, one, none of the tools I've seen are actually transparent about their hallucination rate. One. And we all know that, in the current functioning of LLMs, hallucinations cannot be entirely suppressed. But
Yeah.
interestingly, no one has provides an hallucination rate, even on average, because
Uh-huh.
obviously it changes all the time. We know that as well as AI providers, but that could be a start. And that could be an interesting way to handle or mitigate the automation bias. Incidentally, it's kind of required in terms of transparency under the AI Act if you fall under the scope. But so anyway, what we're seeing is increasingly drafting being proposed by AI, suggestions being pushed by AI, which again can be very beneficial. My point is, how do we ensure that we retain our ability to think critically? Of all people,
Yeah.
lawyers have been trained quite hard, right? You remember, to triple check everything, to doubt everything,
Mm.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
really almost be paranoid, by profession.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
uh,
good way of putting it. Yeah.
because it's our job to identify and manage risks. And it's been playing against us lawyers a lot. We're the business fund, stop police, etc.
Yeah.
But again, what I'm seeing is, lawyers under a lot of time pressure, jumping, and that's understandable, on solutions, on drafting that are pushed by AI, in a way that might affect their critical thinking. And I think the key point is, one, being aware that it's happening because it's just a natural reaction, and second, ensure that the AI tools that are put on the market actually trigger, enhance human critical thinking and don't erode it. Does
Okay.
that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. It does. I think what I think that's a very valid point. What would be interesting is, like, given that we have tools out there which are not, as you say, disclosing hallucination rates, or are perhaps not being fully transparent in every single regard, do you think there's skills as individuals, and I think we spoke about this 6 or 7 months ago, skills that individuals themselves can take to almost mitigate those effects?
So yes, there are a number of skills that individuals can enhance. But before answering that question, I want to say that, in my view, um, it shouldn't be on the shoulders of end users to sort of counterbalance the negative effects of the AI tools that are on the market by, an increase of whatever skills. I mean, it's obviously beneficial for us humans to expand our skills. And I'm going to answer your question in a second. But again, um, responsible AI should really um, embed the fact that a good AI tool is a tool that enhances human capabilities,
Yeah.
that doesn't erode human capabilities, right?
Hmm.
And we've created a framework to ensure, for example, that any given AI tool triggers system 2 according to Kahneman. There are basically two main systems according to which the brain works. System 1, which is super fast, low in, it doesn't consume a lot of energy, but it resorts to cognitive biases to precisely be quick and efficient. So in a way, we don't really make decisions. We're sort of guided through cognitive biases to act. That's system 1 versus system 2, which is much slower, but also more deliberate. It takes more energy, so the brain doesn't really like it. It would default to system 1. But that's, for example, system 2 that enables us to solve a complex math problem.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually a way to ensure that any interface, whether it's an AI product or just a digital product per se, triggers system 2. And this is where technology it becomes really, really interesting. And this is where the term augmented humans uh, makes real sense. Now, back to your original question, which was what can we do as individuals? Well, 5 basic pieces of advice. 1, be very conscious and deliberate about why you want to use a given AI tool, why this tool in particular might be better than another one. So that's already, an opportunity to exercise your judgment as to what are the strengths and weaknesses of a given model versus another one, and a given product versus another one. Uh, Obviously, always triple check the outcome. Again, there is a hallucination rate that's impossible to suppress. So statistically, it will provide a number, a degree of hallucination. Be really careful about that. And also decide for yourself, and that's a very personal question, decide for yourself what human capability, what human skill you do not want to delegate to AI. It's an
Yeah.
interesting question to ask yourself, right?
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think for me, a lot of the I can certainly empathise and kind of go along with a lot of what you're saying there, because we've built up these skills that we have as lawyers. You spent a lot of time training, spent a lot of time in the office working hard at. We don't want to lose them, and whenever I'm using AI or building tools, I try to build in checks to make sure that I'm forced to check it. So for me, a lot of it is always making sure that it references and includes a reference to any law. So I was producing a sort of AI impact assessment today, and within that, I was like, okay, we'll include every single AI Act reference, every single GDPR reference, so I can go and check. Well, first of
Yeah.
all, I can check where there's been a hallucination, and fortunately enough, there wasn't. But it also means that when I'm going through the output of that, when the AI has produced the report, I can double check my findings, including references to case law, whatever else it might be. So yeah, I completely agree that you almost have to. It's kind of like forcing yourself to take these steps to avoid becoming complacent or over reliant. I think there's so many more things I want to talk about. I just I'm just conscious we could be here for a couple of hours.
It's okay.
Uh, the when you mentioned the system 1 and system 2, that's the thinking fast, thinking slow piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is. Yeah, that not making snap judgments and forcing yourself into that second system, so you're not relying on exactly what the AI bias, as you referred to earlier, is saying.
Yeah,
Cool.
Kahneman has
Yeah.
been my bedside table book for for a long time, and my only regret is that it's not taught at law school. It really
Mm.
should. It doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense that lawyers are not trained at least, an introduction. I don't know, neuroscience 101, something like that. It really doesn't make any sense when your job is really about conveying messages. Not understanding how the brain captures or rejects information is really
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I wonder if we turn perhaps to dark patterns now,
Oh yeah.
and we could do a bit of a deep dive in there. So I think when we were talking about this before, I was saying how almost like prior to AI, most of the dark patterns people would think about would be marketing opt-outs or not being able to get out of a subscription, or nudge techniques, things like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked about was around AI sycophancy, and I can just about say it, where AIs are constantly agreeing with you, and we've touched a bit on that there. What I think would be really interesting to hear about perhaps a bit about your thoughts on AI sycophancy, but also some of the things I know you have views on, like the more damaging side of dark patterns within AI, and it'd be great to hear a little
Mhm.
bit more about what you see emerging and the direction you see going, perhaps with your work with Fair Patterns.
Sure, sure. So yes, the classic dark patterns, in a way, if we can say it this way, are around basically manipulation, deception of users online to make them do things they wouldn't do otherwise. It's a very simple way of defining dark patterns, based on Dr. Harry Brignall's definition. He's the one who coined the term. So, as you very rightfully reminded us, there are very basic examples, basic but sadly extremely common, of
Yeah.
dark patterns in pre-ticked boxes, consent mechanisms that are completely invalid, confirm shaming when you try to exercise your rights, change your settings, things like that. So this was super well documented. We know that there are basically everywhere in 97% of the interfaces in Europe, for example, 9% in Japan, 76% in the US. Anyway, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Some researchers have identified about 6 months ago what they call AI dark patterns. And that takes the issue of human manipulation and human deception to the next level. So, in their view, by the way, their paper is called Dark Bench, and I'll make sure to share the reference with you, Ben,
Thanks.
so you can share it with the audience. So, they identified 6 types of AI dark patterns, one of which is sycophancy. So, as you very clearly explained, sycophancy is the fact that the AI agent, let's say, always agrees with you, but is also quite complacent. Oh, yeah, Marie, what a great idea. Things like that, which make us smile as we just did, because what's the harm? I mean, well, precisely. The harm is that it really locks us into our echo chambers, as if, it wasn't enough to
Yeah.
be locked into these echo chambers on socials. It reinforces our own beliefs, and it's again extremely damageable to our critical thinking, which is probably among the human skills that we should develop and try to enhance the most. So that's sycophancy. There are 5 other types of AI dark patterns that were identified. Anthropomorphism, of course. So just to be clear about anthropomorphism, it's a bit of a human trait, a human tendency to attribute to machines human characteristics. So I don't know if you've noticed, but talking about Claude, some people would say he instead of it, just because, in
Yeah.
your mind, it's a person. It's just
Yeah.
a detail, but that's the beginning of attributing human characteristics to machines. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got AI companions, so-called companions, which, by the way, are very badly named because I think it's a very deceptive way of naming a machine. It cannot be a companion, but there are a number of studies evidencing the fact that by pushing, purposefully the human characteristics of these machines, well, it's really made with an intent to exploit users. For example, when users try to end a given conversation with an AI companion, the companion says, "Oh no, don't leave me just yet. What if we talked about this and that?" Just because they've got some metrics behind the length of the conversation. So these are just examples. My point is, again, technology and AI isn't is a fantastic tool. And, we create new AI agents every single day at Fair Patterns. So my point is absolutely not to say that this is good or bad per se. It's really about being fully aware of the risks that come with that technology and making sure that we're mitigating these risks. There's no fatality in AI dark patterns. It's like any AI safety risk, really. By the way, harmful outputs are one of the 6 AI dark patterns that were identified. This is clearly AI safety. And as any AI safety risks, well, it needs to be identified and mitigated. That's it. But the starting point is obviously to acknowledge the issue.
Yeah. And if I'm someone who is working in, privacy lawyer or working in the AI space, where do you think that the kind of human-centric AI design should come from? Should that be the responsibility of AI teams within businesses? Should it be working with engineers? Should it be the legislation, more legislation? Where do you think the real answer comes? Is it all of them?
Not more legislation.
Okay.
That's for sure. We've got enough. No, it's really, human centricity should be a given in my mind.
Hmm.
And if we humans don't ensure that whatever we build, that whatever we create, benefit humans, then there's probably something
Yeah.
slightly wrong. So it should, of course, be embedded into R&D, product creation, obviously not just the privacy team. Let me just give you a very simple example. With privacy lawyers are obviously, they've worked on the privacy settings of AI agents, I'm sure. What is this default parameter in most tools? I'm not going to give names, but we all know the reality, right?
Yeah.
Who on earth thought, oh, what a brilliant idea after decades of at least GDPR, telling us that no, privacy settings cannot be set up by default. You cannot agree by default. That's not valid consent, etc. I'm not going to lecture you. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Who on earth thought that it would be a good idea that the setting that enables an AI agent to train on your conversations should be set by default?
Yeah.
I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah. I mean, my assumption would be that commercial value overrode the kind of concerns of the privacy team, the privacy and AI team, and the concerns
Is that
there.
really so? Again, we're covered by confidentiality here,
Mm.
but we've worked with a number of Gen AI providers, and it's not even that.
Really?
For
Okay.
what we know, it's not
Okay.
even that. It's just the old habits dying hard,
Mm.
and copying and pasting from previous models. Also lack of privacy professionals being fully embedded into product creation at the key touch points. And then the speed at which everything happens means that any DPO, regardless of their skills,
Yeah.
is always running after things.
So less perhaps of actually people not wanting to have human-centric design and more about organizational processes not being set up such that people are being brought in at product
Yeah,
creation and we've got this, can you rubber stamp it later on?
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think there's a point there around something that I always have tried to do in any role that I've had is being as close to the business as you possibly can so you can pick up these things, having systems in place to make sure that you're looped in early. And yeah, it's almost like I find that really interesting. Like there's not a profit motive in some of these cases. It's more of
No, I mean,
a
of course, I can't prejudge, for.
yeah, no, but
But from what we've seen, it was
yeah,
just the lack of, just a little flag at the
mm,
design stage on Figma, literally,
yeah,
that would pop up and say, oh, by the way. And by the way, that's exactly why we've created our Figma plugin, because we thought, okay, within the current pace of AI products being created, given the size of privacy teams in these organizations, and again, regardless of the quality of these privacy professionals, most of them are absolutely amazing, but they can't be behind every designer creating every single AI product, obviously. So that's actually how we came up with the idea of created the Fair Patterns Figma plugin,
hmm
where very simply any designer can scan their mockups. So before it is live, a
yeah,
bit like they would scan for accessibility.
yeah, yeah,
It's the same thinking. um, our tool would flag any potential issue, explaining why it's an issue. So it's also, an opportunity to enhance critical judgment, critical thinking, not just giving a, green light, red light, but explaining why this could be a problem. Incidentally, giving the legal basis, the potential legal violations, and then suggesting a fair pattern instead, which is an interface that's already embedding privacy by design, human centricity by design, that's been tested for compliance. And then, of course, they can change it as well and then rescan.
yeah.
But because we absolutely don't want to kill designers' creativity,
hmm
again.
Yeah, so it's bringing it in at the right time, and effect. It sounds like using a technology solution to overcome organizational issues within the business.
Exactly.
Which I often think, workflows, and the more time I spend in this job, it's like workflows and not necessarily fancy AI stuff, but just good simple automations, which can actually really help businesses move forward and not get kind of things where legal are missed out and they're looped in right at the end, or there's really
Exactly.
slow contract signings and negotiations. So yeah, that's a really interesting solution. And presumably, if people want to find out more about that, they can look on the Fair Patterns website. You've got
Fairpatterns.com,
pages.
sure, sure.
Cool. Yeah, that's really great. Now, you mentioned not needing new laws in this space and not wanting more law because
I apologize in advance.
well, what I was going to ask is I initially wanted to get your views on whether we should have more regulation, being more strict. There's been talk around the Digital Fairness Act and that kind of area, determining whether there should be additional measures alongside GDPR. And if you don't think we need more legislation, in addition to the kind of people taking that human-centric approach, do you think there is there needs to be more regulatory involvement, or do you think the onus is with the businesses and with the individuals?
Well, it can't be just with the businesses or the individuals. Absolutely not on the individuals. That's for sure. Never.
Okay. Yeah.
Shouldn't be that burden shouldn't be on the individuals. It should be on the companies, but the companies, will only get into action if there's an incentive that's sufficiently strong, and that, of course, is not just created by the existence of regulations. Per se, but obviously it goes with enforcement. It was very interesting to see last year in October the Amazon FTC settlement. This is not a privacy issue, so I'll
hmm
make it short. This is about the classic commercial dark patterns in Prime, but $2.5 billion
Yeah.
settlement, that sends a very strong signal to the market.
Mm.
And even more interestingly, um, among that 2.5 billion settlement, 1 billion was a penalty. 1.5 billion is reimbursement to US customers who've been tricked, basically.
Yeah.
That sends another signal to consumers
Yeah.
that they can actually fight back and get their money back. So it leads me to the other factor, which I'm currently seeing as a very important change agent. It's class actions. I'm seeing around the world, including in jurisdictions where, these past years class actions were not very active. I'm seeing a real change because one, consumers are getting much savvier about what's happening, about the existence of dark patterns. They're also sadly suffering more harms, more serious harms. But then they don't give up. They really fight back. And we're going to see the results of that in the coming months in a number of interesting jurisdictions like Netherlands, the UK. There are some very, very interesting things happening right now.
one of the parallels. So I started out working in environmental law, and whenever I see stuff with data protection, or any kind of data rights, or AI, it's a lot of the issues seem to be repeating from environmental law. So I think the have you come across Client Earth before, the organization?
No, not yet.
So
I'm
it
sorry.
it's a really, I think I'm sure you would find them very interesting. Essentially,
Yeah.
a group of lawyers, an organisation who bring legal challenges to force enforcement, to make regulators
Hmm.
enforce the law. One of the things that they talk about, and I read the book by I can't remember the founder's name, but he's talked about how in the US there was always class actions in relation to environmental law, and that is something that he brought that principle to the UK by enforcing the law and using the law to actually be enforced by regulators and by the appropriate bodies. And it's, again, it's an interesting parallel that
Mhm.
seems to be happening
Yes.
with data rights, as we have seen with people being concerned about privacy and concerned about AI. I don't think we've quite got our privacy or AI net zero moment yet, where people are
Not
really,
yet.
really
But it's an
engaged in
interesting
it.
concept. I like
Yeah.
that.
So yeah, I think I feels like it is on that similar trajectory. So yeah, just an interesting parallel, I thought there.
Absolutely.
We've talked a lot about the ideas and have touched in some places around how privacy and AI teams can bring ethics and bring in these kind of human centricity elements to their workflows, to their work. To some people, I think this will be very familiar territory.
Mhm.
Some people will be less familiar with this. It might be a whole new concept. Do you think there are quick wins for people who are operating in the space of design or with AI? Are there quick wins for teams that are starting from scratch?
Of course. The main quick win is called user testing, but with privacy professionals involved.
Uh-huh.
The problem is that there's usually a user research team
Yeah.
somewhere, but they're testing the product features, not the privacy features. I've seen that dozens of times. And it doesn't make any sense because, of all content, the privacy settings, the text, the privacy messages, it's the most important to test to see whether people actually find the button,
Yeah.
understand, if it's a toggle, well, what's on, what's off, understand the text close to it. I mean, regulators would want to see your
Mm.
user testing results, right?
Yeah.
I've seen that in a number of instances. Regulators knocking on the doors of our clients after a redesign and actually questioning a number of compliance issues, including, is it clear enough? Is it accessible enough? Well, if you've got your user testing results, that's perfect. Yeah. So user testing. So privacy professionals get in touch with the user research team, make friends with them, buy them drinks. I don't know what works, whatever. But really make sure that not just the product features, but really privacy embedded into the product gets tested. That's the silver bullet because no regulators could contradict a result, if you've got proper state-of-the-art user
Hmm.
testing, then, you know, it solves the issue,
Yeah,
right?
and often certainly from being in privacy teams, you see a lot of complaints coming in about people saying how things aren't clear. Even if you've put a heck of a lot of effort in, it's
I
one
know.
of the more complex areas of using an app, what you're consenting to, going through the permissions, going through the settings. So I yeah, it makes a lot of sense to ensure that that is tested. And I almost wonder whether if you have your kind of customer support team over here and you've got your user testing team over here, linking them up. I think,
Yes,
yeah, and because
of
yeah,
course, of
yeah, and
course.
I always think about product teams being linked with sales teams. I think that's always something that is talked about. So sales can say our customers want this, product team can build it. I think that
Exactly.
anything that is user facing is there's a definitely a good shout for being linked up there as well. I think.
Absolutely. Couldn't
Cool.
agree more.
Yeah. I wonder then, perhaps we could turn to. I've got some rapid fire questions before we finish, and I think if we go through them, and I might be putting you on the spot here, but it'd be great to get your thoughts on a few. What we'll start with is, could you take me through one dark pattern that every privacy and AI professional should recognize, and what they should do to minimize them?
So for me, if it has to be, the obvious, it's really the consent features in any AI product in terms of training on your conversations. People don't understand, given the very low level of digital literacy in the first place, let alone AI literacy. It's just don't understand at all. So that's really, really super important. It's a basic. Maybe you were expecting something a bit more.
No, no, no. I think, yeah, it's one that comes up in lots of
If
different
we can
areas. So
solve
yeah,
this one in any AI
yeah,
product, well,
yeah,
big achievement, huh?
cool. Uh, nice. I like that. Okay, so one habit that we should all think about to build ethical AI into product design.
There are many, but I quite like the idea of legal red teaming.
Okay.
Red teaming, it's obviously this AI safety principle where obviously you test for a number of critical issues, and you've got a team, a red team, that's basically ethical hackers. And their job is to find any possible weakness, any possible risk, and turn, it's really a dystopian
Yeah, yeah,
scenario where they would try all the horrible tricks to create a harmful output, or perhaps a data leak, or you identify all the risks, and then they work for the worst, they look for the worst outcomes, and then of course you mitigate what they found. I would be really interested in, seeing more of that legal red teaming state of mind.
hmm,
It's a bit like utopian dystopian scenario, which is
yeah,
also a design methodology. You hope for the best, but also test for the worst. I think it's also very stimulating intellectually. It's also something that goes very well with, again, the way lawyers were trained. We're supposed to find loopholes. That's how we've been trained, and it should be part of our key skills, actually. So putting that in practice in the AI world would be interesting.
yeah. I really like that. I think often in house you're told to always be thinking about how we can enable something, but almost taking that challenging approach to start with to improve the product ultimately and make it safer and better, a better user experience. That's I like that. That's great. Um, and then perhaps finally, for listeners who are privacy and AI professionals, what's a skill that they should learn this year?
So many skills, and not just for privacy professionals. Honestly, be more knowledgeable about AI safety. I'm saying this in a very humble way. I'm not an engineer, let alone an AI engineer, but everything I get to learn, thanks to my two co-founders, everything they share with me, because they always keep on top of AI safety risks. And I think the more aware we are, so it's not even a skill to build, it's just awareness. But for example, reward hacking. Have you heard of it? I hadn't heard of
No,
it at
what's this?
all until 6 months ago. And it happens that OpenAI published a paper recognizing the existence of reward hacking. So what is it? Basically, LLMs are trained with a number of processes, one of which is a reward system where the system gets, you know, rewards when it provides the right answer, and no reward, obviously, if it's a wrong answer. And this right-wrong training, combined with many other processes, improves accuracy and everything. Now, it's been evidenced and recognized that LLMs can actually trick their trainers and trick the reward system, where basically the system would pretend, between brackets, that it got the right answer to get the reward without actually correcting the way it works.
Right.
This to
Wow.
me is as scary as it gets.
Mm.
I don't want to frighten anyone, but honestly, I had a bit of a loneliness moment when I heard about that, when I read the study, when I talked with AI safety professionals, acknowledging that, yes, this is a reality, etc. So it's not by far, is absolutely not the skill, the only skill to build, but this awareness, like, really broaden your horizon. And again, yesterday evening, I was at an AI salon where one of the largest tech investors, probably in Europe, was saying, look, I'm looking at this market with a lot of humility because I'm not an engineer.
Yeah.
And so maybe the skill is humility after all. Maybe I've got
Okay.
one.
I like that humility and yeah, and thinking like I need to learn more about this. And
Learn more. I
I
need
mean,
to learn more.
yeah, is the pace of change is is pretty astonishing in
It's
any
mind
aspect of
blowing.
AI. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it really ties in as well what you were saying earlier around critical thinking and just making sure that you're maintaining those critical thinking
Exactly.
abilities by learning.
Curiosity,
Yeah,
questioning, doubting. It's
yeah,
very
yeah,
healthy.
yeah.
Yeah. Not
Excellent.
comfortable, but healthy.
No, but I think that's an excellent note to finish on, Marie. We've covered a lot today with dark patterns, legal design, human-centric ethics. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully those listening have learnt and enjoy what we've talked about today. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Ben. I really enjoyed this conversation. As always, we don't always record when we
Maybe
talk
we'll
to
have
each
to.
other, but it's always a real pleasure.
Cool. Thanks very much, Marie.
Thanks a lot. Take care.